As legal professionals, we are all aware of the range of skills essential for practice. So those are things like persuasive communication, sharp analytical thinking, comprehensive research abilities, problem-solving prowess, commitment to ethics. Because of technology, because things are changing so rapidly, I'm seeing associates able to move the needle faster than their predecessor as far as figuring out what they want out of their practice. The benefits of relationships extend far beyond, personal satisfaction and happiness. They really play a critical role in our professional lives as well. We already talked about kind of the impact of these connections on skill development and growth.
My name is Nina, and I'll be the moderator for this webinar. I wanted to start out by giving a bit of background on our speakers, Lana Manganello and Benjamin Schwefel. Lana Manganello is the Managing Director of Equinox Strategy Partners, providing attorneys and law firms with strategic counsel to increase marketing visibility and drive revenue. She has devoted over 15 years to coaching new and experienced lawyers and other service professionals on topics related to annual business planning, business development, coaching, training, and marketing. Ben Schwafel's practice focuses on trusts and estates, including estate planning, trust administration, probate, conservatorships, and fiduciary litigation. Ben represents a broad range of clients, including high net worth individuals and families, trustees, beneficiaries, entrepreneurs, business executives, and professional fiduciaries. He regularly works with his clients on advanced estate planning techniques that minimize income, gift, and estate tax consequences. The webinar presentation you're about to see will be approximately 1 hour, and Lana and Ben will also be taking audience questions after the presentation is complete. If you have any questions that come up for them during the presentation, please feel free to submit them through that Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen. Without further ado, here are Lana and Ben to discuss driving your success, essential habits for law firm associates in the post-pandemic landscape.
Thank you so much, Nina and Marina. We're very excited to be here. I think this is a very pertinent topic. I think Ben would agree with me that we're in a time of extreme and rapid change. And I think for associates, it really means that being as intentional and proactive as possible is really going to be a requirement for the attorneys that are going to be successful moving forward. As Nina said a little bit about me, I work with attorneys on business development and marketing. And I really do that because I have recognized that those skills create an opportunity to build a practice that someone can really buy into as far as the type of work that they are working on being really of interest to them and the people that they work with, and having that ability to control your work leads to career satisfaction in a way that I don't see other, a lack of those things. And then also, it produces the best lawyers I've found, the ones that really enjoy their work and are excited about the control that they have over their careers. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ben Schwefel. I'm currently a partner. I just made partner this last year. And so I literally was an associate right when COVID hit. I started about 4 days at this firm before we were flattening the curve in early March 2020. So totally agree. Very pertinent topic. I know we're excited to kind of dive into the presentation and hopefully give you some helpful tips and tricks along the way.
Great. So let's share the slide. Here we go. So let's get right into what we will be discussing today. The intent for this is to really equip you with some tools and strategies needed for building the habits that will lead to the skills that will help you find enjoyment and success in your practice. So we'll be exploring the principles of persuasion and how to develop relationships, also delving into the intricacies of networking, and then also looking at how a strong reputation attracts the type of work that you're most interested in. All right, so let's get started by really understanding the role of habit formation in legal skill development. So as legal professionals, you're all aware of the range of skills essential for practice. So those are things like persuasive communication, sharp analytical thinking, comprehensive research abilities, problem-solving prowess, commitment to ethics. And then there's some of these more people skills of building relationships, building trust. These are all integral to your work, but it's no secret that these skills are not acquired overnight. Most of them are not ones that you learn in law school. So we've found that the key to honing and refining them lies in something profound, which is habit formation. So let's talk about habit. So there's extensive evidence showing that consistent practice is key to skill development. There was a study in 1993 that showed that consistent practice was the primary factor differentiating expert performers, whether those were athletes or people using knowledge-based work. So skills, especially interpersonal skills, require consistent practice to refine and perfect. And habits create a mechanism for that kind of consistency. So when you develop a habit of practicing a skill, it ensures that you're regularly applying and improving that skill, improving on that skill. And in the context of relationship building, a habit could be regularly connecting with new contacts on LinkedIn, setting aside time to schedule networking meetings on, the first Friday of every month, or even simply things like consistently remembering to ask about a client's personal interest during a meeting, and then keeping notes and remembering to go over your notes before you meet with that person the next time. The next component of habits that's so powerful is this marginal gains or continuous small improvements. There's a British cycling coach, Sir David Brailsford, who supported this concept with research in performance psychology. And skill development is usually not a matter of a big single breakthrough, but a result of continuous small improvements over time. So something that you could apply to your own work is every morning spending 15 minutes focused on reading about your practice area or something that you're interested in. While it feels like a small thing, over the course of a year, you'll have really developed a deep understanding of that knowledge and have an understanding of how to apply that. And Ben, feel free to interrupt me as we're going through this.
Sure. I'll just piggyback on an example right there. Like that 15 minutes. There's practical examples of that in practice that we use every single day. When you're an associate, oftentimes it's expected that you're available for a partner when they need you to. Well, find out when the partners are going to be there. Find out when they reach out to you the most, right? Like I realize that I'm traditionally more like an 8:30 office arriver, and the partners were like 9:30. And so I knew that I had this hour window in the morning where I could, one, build in time for me to do me things. I use the term pay myself first. And that's where I would do it. I would do it from 8 to 8:30, and then I'd get caught up on things. So by the time they arrived and stuff started flying at me in my day, I was already ahead. I'd already read the article, exchanged some like messages with people on LinkedIn, whatever it was. Just scroll, look through influencers and things on LinkedIn that I want to take in that intel. And I had 30 minutes to do it. I knew every morning that's where it was. And I planned the day out the night before. So I protected that time, and I didn't just scoot my hours to absorb that entire, 30-minute window. So there's little things that you can do by paying attention to the way that your workplace works that you can make sure you're prioritizing that little bit of 15-minute increment day after day.
Awesome. And I think, if you had to figure out when to squeeze that 30 minutes in throughout the day, chances are it would not have become a habit and something that you would, often find that you did not get a chance to get around to it. So I love that. Efficiency and making things automatic is another piece. There's a lot of work that goes into kind of the cognitive demands of figuring out what you need to be doing. So creating these behaviors around things that are specific to the skills that you're trying to develop creates some momentum. So a key study in 2010 found that new behaviors become more automatic with repeated practice or up until around 10 weeks. So figuring out how to, do something like Ben was suggesting and giving yourself about 10 weeks to make sure it's a habit will alleviate some of the mental load of figuring out what should I be like, what is the best thing for me to be doing right now. And so Ben made a conscious effort towards a specific goal of wanting to make sure he gets things done, whether that's because he's got personal things or certain skills he's looking to develop. Once he's kind of created that, he no longer has to think about it, and it starts to build its own momentum. And that's something that specifically when I'm working with attorneys is figuring out how do we, once we've identified what you're trying to make happen, what are the activities that we need to do to build those skills or build those relationships, and how do we set that in motion so you don't have to think about it all the time? Because that's going to most likely increase your opportunities for success.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
I was gonna just add in real fast. While you're in that zone of trying to make it a habit, when you're trying to get into the positive swing of things, I found by automatically blocking out on my calendar, telling my assistant, I'm going to do this. Ask me how that went. Or I have a mentor in the firm. Various things where people would ask me, have you been doing that? Because I know it's the first thing, especially when it was new. It was the first thing I'd give away because I came into a pile of emails, an urgent task, something was always going on, and it was easiest to get rid of the thing that was for me. And so by putting that on my calendar and making it look official, it reminded me, and it was just that intentional little bit that allows you to hold space for that. And then pretty soon it becomes automatic. And maybe that time frame is different for everybody, but I still hold it on my calendar just because that helps me handle my day the best. So
great. And that accountability piece cannot be overemphasized. Sadly, we care more about, the way other people perceive us sometimes than actually making sure we get our goals met. So I second that. Find people in your office that you can share your goals and what you are, what your tactics are, and then the likelihood of your actually getting it done goes up dramatically. And then this habit goal interface is a similar concept of, once you've identified the goal and have started to create that habit, like I lived in Pasadena and worked in West LA and wanted to be healthy, and also had the added encouragement of getting on the road before 6 a.m. meant that my 20-minute commute stayed at 20 minutes versus going to 90 minutes. And so even when I moved and no longer had that commute pressure of why I wanted to work out in the morning, it was a habit that I maintained. So I was able to stick to my goal without thinking about, how do I fit this in? Because I had already done the work of aligning my goals with my behaviors.
yeah, and then I'll just add a quick thing on that. Try to make sure that you don't get out of the swing. There's like you take that vacation or a trial comes up or you have a big deal, whatever it is, it's easy to like, oh, I can't do that this week. But then you got to get back. You got to get back on it the next week because all that work that you did to make it the habit, sometimes it's easy to fall out of it pretty quick. And then you're like, I really missed last year. Entering billing is another one for me. That's one. If you have the habit at the end of the day doing it, great. At the end of the week or end of the month, you're in great shape. If you don't, it's a rough time. So, and it's easier to fall out of that from that 1 week vacation you took. So get back on the horse.
Great. And I think that kind of dovetails nicely into this habit loop of understanding how you can create these habits. So the cue would be, the trigger. Routine is what you're actually doing. And then you'll need a reward to actually get moving with creating these things as a habit. So Charles Duhigg did research on this at MIT. And this simple loop is really what governs so much of our behavior. More of the research says that about 50% of what we actually do every day is based on our habits. So this is important in understanding in all aspects of your life, but recognizing the cues and triggers of our routines, we can consciously establish the beneficial habits and disrupt the unproductive ones. Like one that's maybe not so great is you're feeling stressed or anxious, and that trigger has you going into the snack room to grab, a Snickers bar or a treat. And so the reward is you're, temporarily comforted by your Snickers bar and kind of building this unhealthy eating habit that's part of feeling stressed or anxious. Another one is, a partner assigns you a task that feels tedious, and that's the trigger, and the routine is you're delaying the task and doing things that you perceive as more enjoyable or easier. And the reward is you're kind of immediately relieved from the stress or boredom of the task, but you are now creating this habit loop of procrastination. Have you ever heard of any of these things, Ben?
Yeah, I live them out far too regularly, I have to admit.
So the reward piece is important. So like when you're thinking about billing, maybe not letting yourself watch, your binge-worthy TV until you get your billing done, or having that glass of wine at the end of the night. But figuring out what is and maybe it should be a more healthy reward, but whatever it is that you're looking forward to, kind of associating it with a habit that's going to help you achieve your goals.
Yeah. I was gonna say I wrap my wife into that because she knows that if I don't have it, then while she's watching that TV, I'm gonna go to our office and work on billing rather than us hanging out together. So I also have her in that loop of like, remind me that I really like just hanging out and not doing billing some night at the end of the month when that happens, because I don't like doing that.
Yeah.
So
Oh, Lord, it feels better when you're watching TV or doing whatever you're doing and not having the pressure of like, I know I should have done this or should be doing this instead of that.
exactly.
So really the reason I'm talking about habits is because this is truly the bedrock of developing the skills that you need. Not only the legal skills, but also the personal and interpersonal skills that are going to help you throughout your career. Um, so one of the things that we're going to talk about moving forward is how you're able to create opportunities for yourself within your organization and then ultimately in the marketplace. So a lot of these things when we're talking to associates, they're internally focused. So you're thinking about how to build relationships within your organization so that you have the buy-in from the people, because law is unique that it's pretty much an apprenticeship model as to how you're going to be learning a lot of the skills that you need to be an incredible lawyer. And so it requires buy-in from the people that you work alongside with. And so early on, spending time thinking about these things as far as building relationships, being visible, building a positive reputation so that you get more of the work that you want and more opportunities to hone your skills. It can't be under, emphasized, and then will really nicely kind of set the foundation as you then are thinking about building out a practice that includes people that are not currently in the firm and building a book of business and starting to originate work.
And all of those things can take time. And so the earlier you start these loops and start these things, whether it's internal or external, the better.
Exactly. And I mean, it's guaranteed to take time. So, and the nice thing, and I think Ben and I will agree on this, is with intentionality, because of technology, because things are changing so rapidly, I'm seeing associates able to move the needle faster than their predecessor as far as like figuring out what they want out of their practice, where that might have been a slower, more organic process for the partners in the firm where they kind of like hung out long enough and then it emerged. And I feel like now we're in a time where that was kind of a luxury almost. And now we need to be more intentional about thinking about what do we actually want out of our practices and then figuring out how to make that happen for yourself. One thing I'm noticing working with law firms is, they're adapting to this changing pace and changing world. And so if you're waiting on your law firm to kind of present you with stuff and give you, step instructions on how to make this happen for yourself, you're likely going to be disappointed. So really kind of taking the reins and figuring out for yourself, what do I want and how do I make it happen? And I'm also noticing with a lot of the attorneys that I work with, their path is a new one. Like a lot of the people I work with are building practices in a way that no one's built them before with, either clients or practice areas that are new. So it's an exciting time in that regard where you really have the ability to kind of shape exactly what you want out of a legal career. You don't have to, I feel like sometimes people are like, who in this firm do I want to emulate, to the T? I feel like that's happening less and less. And it's more, learning from these people as you shape your own identity.
Yeah, I often characterize it because I worked at a few different firms that I look at the various partners that I worked for when I was an associate. And I said, I don't need to be him or her exactly because that's not who I am. But they do this so well. And when I sit in those meetings, I want to learn about how they connect with these people. Their clients almost have this like experience where they're bonded to them kind of for life. And I'm like, how do they build such a relationship so quickly and establish so much trust? And I'm like, that quality of this person, I love. They may have other bad qualities. I'll let those things go. But I try to figure out how, like, where's my weak spot and then pick and choose from, I'll say a half dozen people that I worked with very closely and think that are very talented at various things. And then try to piece those together in my own style because I'm not them, but I saw what they do really well. And so it is a really unique opportunity depending, and especially if you work at firms that have more and more people around because you can do the even outside of your practice group. Because they're very talented in other ways, doing other practices, and you can glean all of that from them.
Exactly. So let's talk about professional relationships. Many of you have heard about Harvard's study on adult development. It's one of the longest running studies on happiness. And what we found from that work is that the quantity and quality of our relationships are fundamental determinants of our happiness. And the findings indicate that the warmth and depth of our relationships we maintain have profound effects on our health and well-being. So, advance the slide. So, the benefits of relationships extend far beyond, personal satisfaction and happiness. They really play a critical role in our professional lives as well. We already talked about kind of the impact of these connections on your skill development and growth, as well as career growth. So let's talk about the various impacts of what relationships can provide. So I think we talked a little bit about this, kind of the emotional support of having professional relationships. Being a lawyer is not easy for anyone, and it's not fun all the time for anyone. So as you're kind of going through things that feel like challenges, having people that you can talk to and connect with is going to help you overcome the things that are difficult. There's lots of studies on, and I've done one myself, on people who have more friends inside of their firm or more people within the profession are more likely to be interested in partnership, are more likely to stay in the profession. So there's a lot of reasons why having professional connections is going to help you just with your mental well-being as you go through, what it is to be an early career attorney.
Yeah, and I'll quickly add on to that too. That emotional support component is really important. We come from an environment as lawyers in law school where you're getting ranked against your peers, where you're trying to beat them out for the journal, the job, the OCI interview, whatever it is. So we've been primed in this circumstance where we need to beat the people around us rather than look at the people around us as a resource, as a friend, as somebody that is in the trenches with you, if you will. So a lot of the people that I came up with, I'm still friends with. They're now either they might be working with me because we've reconnected at firms. They call me because they're saying, hey, I'm on the brink of partnership. I need your opinion on this. And instead, I've built this like network of people who I can call about literally anything rather than people that during those early years, I was like, well, I'm going to try to make sure I do better than him or her. So I get that raise. And in the long term, that pays off. You have to get out of that kind of law school mentality that we're raised up in and instead realize you're all in there together trying to move your careers forward. And those people end up being some of the most important people in your network. If not right away, definitely a few years down the road.
And it's not a zero-sum game. So the people that I see that are most successful recognize, the competition is not in their office. And so or really it's not about the competition and figuring out how to connect with people and leverage other people is only going to help you. And so collaboration, I mean, the firms that I work with where people actually talk to one another and want to work together are the most dynamic. The clients enjoy it as well as the attorneys. I think that's a big deal. The more connections you have, the more opportunities you will have for promotion, partnership. And then I think it's important to also recognize, I mean, we've kind of hit this a couple of times, but the knowledge and skill expansion. So the more people that you're connected with professionally, whether that's in your firm, in the community, the more perspectives that you'll have and more opportunities to kind of see things in a different way that might be able to help you professionally. Visibility, getting recognition, new opportunities, having a larger professional network is an important component of having relationships. People are generally, the more relationships you have, the more people are trying to connect you with even more people. So again, these things build momentum. Good relationships lead to trust, which can be leveraged to influence decisions and navigate office politics successfully. I work with a lot of attorneys at firms where things are not perfect. And there's lots of things that could be changed for the benefit of the firm. And what I've recognized is, I want you to be the person that changes that. It's not going to happen, when you walk in the door. You really have to build the buy-in from the people there so that you can build up the leverage to be able to actually bring change to the organization. And I've seen that inside of law firms, inside of nonprofits. It's a common thing that, having more connections is going to give you much more opportunity to be impactful. And then strong relationships at work is going to lead to a more enjoyable work environment. Then I imagine it's a lot more fun to work with people who like one another and that are friends. And then turnover goes down. And so having this opportunity to, have higher retention where people, morale stays up and you're actually able to rely on one another is important. And then mentorship opportunities, I think a lot of these things overlap.
And I really can't be undervalued. I mean, these things are so important. If you've been in an environment where you have not had relationships like this, you've seen the kind of the dark side. We're talking about all like the good stuff that happens. And you've probably seen versions of it if you were not in a very healthy environment. But the more that you can dig into some of those issues, the longer you're there, every group that I've ever worked in, I leave when I've left those firms, I really miss those people. And I'm like, I really like them. I had to move for my own professional growth, whatever. But I miss those people. And I've moved 3 times. Every single one has been that way. And it's really compounding interest, right? That's like this idea financial advisors talk about where we build, we let it ride over time, and we continue to invest. All of these really good things continue to happen, and they continue to grow, and then they last, and they last a long time. So you got to kind of dive in and start on that, and you'll start seeing probably there's something in every one of these 10 and probably even more that are not on this list that come out of those relationships in a really positive way.
Definitely. Okay, so let's talk about how to build relationships. So we'll talk about building relationships within your organization and then outside of your organization. Some people work in very small firms where building relationships inside the organization may not be difficult. But what I find, in some of the larger organizations is, there's so many people that you can build relationships with. Thinking about, how to do it and with whom is sometimes a challenge, and sometimes the default is I just need to focus on the partners that I'm working with. And that is definitely a lost opportunity. You're with a large firm for a reason. And so a big part of that needs to be all of the resources and people within that organization. So being intentional about building out these relationships needs to be prioritized and, needs to go beyond the firm partners that you're working with. So, making sure, especially if you're working in a multi-office firm, it's easy to reach out to other associates that you may not have a real facilitated reason to connect with, but going out of your way to connect with these people. Ben already mentioned there's kind of like a hazing process that goes into any early career, especially in the legal profession. And so you already have a lot in common. So being intentional about connecting with other associates. You want to look outside of your department also as you're kind of figuring out your firm and figuring out what exactly you like and don't like. Having people outside of your department that you can connect to is going to be helpful in understanding, the bureaucracy at your firm, but also just having a better perspective of your work.
Yeah. A couple examples. I just work on a single office mid-sized firm, but I've worked in a small firm and I have friends at these like really large firms. It's about the intentionality. If you're at another one of your offices taking a deposition, one that you don't normally office out of, set up a meeting with someone, go to lunch with someone, whatever is appropriate in your environment. I don't know what that is, but find an excuse while you're there to go in, pop in, say hi. For me, when I started this firm, there are partners outside of my practice area. And I don't want the only thing they know about me to be a billing number on some spreadsheet. I want them to know I know Ben. I talked to him in the kitchen while I was toasting a bagel on a Friday morning. Even though I do construction defect and he does estate planning, and I have really no idea what estate planning even is. Because you just have to look for opportunities to do that within those people or where you sit. Sometimes you sit in practice groups. Sometimes you sit just wherever there was an open space, especially with hoteling and other things that firms are doing since 2020. So find someone who sits near you. I'll give you an example. I sit a few offices down from a bunch of people who don't do anything like me. And I try to make sure we grab lunch or a happy hour or whatever it is. Somebody may want to do a 7 a.m. coffee. Find an excuse to go do it and build those relationships intentionally.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about how we can build relationships because there's, science behind a lot of this, and it may feel like, well, I don't know where to start. So Robert Cialdini has a book called Principles of Persuasion, and I want to focus on 3 of those principles just to give you some understanding of, how you can set out to do this in a mindful way. So liking, reciprocity, and consistency are the three that we'll focus on. So we'll first talk about liking, which is the idea that we tend to favor what is familiar to us. Um, and that's part of like the mere exposure effect of something that we see often is something that we generally will prefer. And I think this is particularly relevant in a law firm environment where frequent interactions can help build rapport and foster meaningful relationships. And that may have happened much more pre-pandemic, where you often were everyone was in the office. Things have shifted. Even if people are in the office, they're not working the same way that they did in 2019 as far as you know, how much time they're spending there and what they plan on doing there. It's usually getting in and out. And so being thoughtful about this is important, and figuring out how can I be familiar to these people so that they start to like me, because there's going to be a point where people who you may not be working directly with are going to have some say in your future. And so if they haven't really seen you and know nothing about you, it's going to be to your detriment. So visibility is a key component of this. The more we're seen, the more we're liked, like I said. So one of these things, and we'll get into this, definitely is going to be, I feel like sometimes firms will say, okay, everyone gets back to the office. I don't think that that automatically means you're going to be more visible. I think that I can be much more visible with intention, where I'm thinking about who's going to be where and what are they looking at and how do I stay top of mind with them, versus sitting in the office while their doors are closed just because I'm in the office thinking that my business has stopped up. All right. So let's talk about building familiarity. So Ben talked about it a little bit, but I think doing outreach to have dialogue is going to be the best way to increase your visibility. So reach out to seasoned colleagues that you admire. Let them know that you're working on your, career goals or business development goals, and that you want their insight. And try to do this face to face versus over the phone. Definitely do not do this via email. But if it's video because they're in a different office, the second point is to meet in person. There's a lot of components of connection that can happen in an in-person environment. So, I think the more that you do this, the more you'll be reminded of like the value of being physically with someone. And it really helps to kind of build that familiarity and likability component.
And which is it? Look for abilities to do that. There's some on here about events and firm events, but if you're in a different office from someone, for example, like I have a friend of mine who works down in downtown San Diego. That's an hour and a half from me. But when I'm down there for other client meetings or something like that, I try to make sure, are you available for a happy hour before I get back on the road, or dinner if it's because I'm going to be in a deposition all day. And at least rather than just sit on the freeway in traffic, I go and try to make a face-to-face connection with that person or those people. Like last time I was down there, I had 4 of them and we all went to a dinner together. So it's like you might be at an industry conference. There is some reason that that person that you're talking to in another office may be physically near you. You have to be intentional rather than being like, oh, I'm busy while I'm down there. Make room, find a way, because that intentionality is how you end up making those things happen and how you make those lasting connections with people.
Yeah, and you're invested so much into doing these types of things. If you're going to be in the office, the investment is already there, so get the most out of it. Mm-hmm. So inquire about personal interest. I am shocked at how quickly people will jump right into work. Take a second to just ask somebody what they did this weekend, or let them know, what your Thanksgiving plans are. It may feel like it's better for efficiency for us to jump right into the matter or whatever is going on. But you're going to get much more out of your work with partners and colleagues when there is that personal connection. And so being intentional about, like, I'm going to ask when we get on this Zoom call about this person's, what's coming up, and the weekends are always easy, or the holidays give you a very easy question of like, hey, are you traveling for the holidays? But make the time for that. And obviously have some discernment about like how much time you're going to spend talking about yourself and, what you've got going on. Really use this as an opportunity to find similarities, and then also to, demonstrate genuine interest in what these people have going on in their lives.
And just look around. I mean, if you're meeting with someone in person or even on video, I mean, how many times do you see something in the background of the video or in someone's office? Like I have a partner who has a bunch of guitars. I don't know anything about guitars, but I assume he likes them, because why else would he have 6 of them in his office? So you can ask him, oh, and then you find out he's into jazz. And so it's like by asking questions and just observing things right in front of you, or even on a video camera or something you read in their website bio. I always include things like I like wine and I'm a basset hound. You wouldn't believe how often people ask me about those 2 or 3 things that I put in my firm profile, and people always ask me about them. So find those things and then ask people about themselves, rather than do less talking about yourself and do more asking about them. And you'll see things starting to pay off, and then people reciprocate. People who are usually good at building relationships want to know about you too. And so you have to find the right balance, and discernment was the perfect word to use, but you'll find that will help you get off on the right foot.
Right. And then show up to the things your firms are actually putting together for you. Those are opportunities that you don't have to think about. You just go. Make sure you're prioritizing those types of things. Also, when you're invited to participate in meetings that are on Zoom, put your camera on, even if you're not talking. People want to see your face, and they'll get maybe they don't want to see your face, but it'll make it much more likely that they'll remember you and become familiar with you. And that familiarity means that if they see my face kind of smiling at every meeting, and then always a black box, and then they ask, they're who do you want to put on this matter, Ben or Lana? And they remember me and don't remember Ben. I have a better chance of being chosen for these types of opportunities. So check all these boxes to put yourself in the best position to get what you want. And then the repeated visibility part, I think, is really important, because again, we're trying to create momentum here. So like going down to the San Diego office once and meeting with someone and having a great meeting, and then never reaching out to that person again, is not going to help you as much as if you are now kind of conscious about this person and how can I stay top of mind beyond driving an hour and a half to see them. What are some other ways that I can ping them over email, or the different ways to just stay top of mind and be familiar to these people.
I'll add, there's groups that people pay for and then don't show up. They'll show up once or twice a year. And it's like, if you're going to make a commitment, show up every single time, because that visibility thing really does make a difference. You start talking to people, they'll catch you before the meeting, after the meeting. Otherwise, the first time they'll ask you for a little elevator pitch about yourself, and then they'll see you again in 9 months. And then you're probably going to give that same elevator pitch again because they don't remember you.
Right. Yes. So be intentional about what you're trying to make happen, and then create these behaviors that will build this. I mean, I am not generally just trying to encourage people to be busy for being busy's sake and like going to a million things. Have a strategy as to like, who am I trying to be visible to, and be intentional about how you're going to do that, versus just saying yes to everything and kind of overwhelming yourself with activity without being specific about what you're actually trying to make happen. So similarity is another component of liking. And so that's part of the, asking people about their hobbies and interests and figuring out what you might have in common. Birds of a feather flock together. Having these dialogues is going to give you this opportunity to find commonality with people. So that's a key component of liking. People like them. And so you may not on its surface see the similarities between you and a 65-year-old partner that's like of a different era and grew up differently. But once you start talking about things, professional things, you'll start to uncover a lot of opportunities for you to find similar interests. So I think that's a key component to think about. So reward theory of attraction suggests that we're inclined to like those of us who make us feel good or bring us some form of reward. So attorneys like compliments. Everyone likes compliments. And the truth is, it's less about figuring out how can I compliment this person, but more about thinking about what can I tell this person that I truly feel that's going to make them feel good. And the truth is you work with the people that you work with because you admire them for some reason. And so making that known is only going to help you, saying, oh, I really appreciate how you built your practice in this way, or how you handled, this brief or this client engagement. Express how you feel about people in a positive way. And all of us like people who like us generally. So if it's obvious that you like them, the chances of them liking you go up pretty substantially. But it needs to be sincere. So hopefully this isn't coming across as like, turning into a brown noser for the sake of brown nosing, but really looking at like, getting out of your own way of like, oh, might be weird if I said that to them. People really appreciate when you're vulnerable and authentic.
Yeah, and there's a tension too between that idea of just flattery for flattery's sake. Find a genuine reason to like someone, because it may not, but you may know immediately this is not the person I'm traditionally kind of drawn to, and they're a difficult personality for me. Well, keep looking. Find some other way to relate to them, and then at least in maybe the limited interactions that you have with that partner or that person in your firm or in your group that you're going to have to be forced to communicate with, find some way to ease that. Otherwise, that tension, you're just going to come back to it over and over again. Find a way to appreciate who they are and find some sort of connection with them, and things will become easier. Maybe not the easiest still, but easier. And if you look hard enough, you will find something.
Yes. And life is too short. All of my coaching is around, finding people that you're in alignment with. There's a big world. There's no reason for you to have to be manipulating people into liking you. You should be aligning yourself in a way where you actually are achieving your goals by building a network of people who are like-minded. So being conscientious on the front end of what you're trying to build here, and how that aligns with your personal preferences and interests and who you are as a human being, making sure that we're thinking about that on the front end. If you're an M&A attorney, but you hate working with venture capital or, like people in the finance world, maybe you want to reconsider M&A. Maybe you want to consider approaching the market in a different way, but don't force yourself into a box that you don't fit in, because I can guarantee you it's going to be uncomfortable and you're probably not going to be successful. The last one is kind of a tricky one to talk about kind of presenting your best self. Associates, there's not a lot that people have to judge you on. So make sure that what you show up as is the best version of yourself. There are a lot of studies based on kind of appearance and people attributing positive traits like competency and honesty and social skills to the way that people appear. I think Cornell did a study of defendants, and the ones that were perceived as less attractive got harsher sentences. So whether I'm just delivering the information, whether or not, you agree with it morally, but this is human nature and it's something you need to be considering. When people are looking at how you present yourself, they are making snap decisions on like, oh, this person looks like a competent lawyer versus, presenting yourself in a different way where they're making other assumptions. There was another study that showed that people who smile are perceived as being more attractive. And so that's something to think about is like, am I perceived as someone who is open to discussion and feedback? And what should I be doing to kind of check the boxes again to get what I'm trying to get out of my career?
Yeah, keep in mind too that like a partner may say this, hey, this person just doesn't look put together. I can't take him in that client meeting, and you may want to really be in that client meeting, and that may be the difference. Is because they're like, yeah, I can't do that. But there is definitely something to that about presenting yourself and looking ready for whatever the circumstance is. And it sounds kind of, you went to law school, you did all these years, and now you're talking to me about how I present myself. But whether it's to clients or whether it's to partners, it makes a huge difference in how you're perceived by them. And there's a body language component to that too, where I've had meetings where people sat there with their arms folded, and I don't think it's because they're just mad and not liking it, but the way that it's perceived, you have to be like really aware of that, aware of the body language, aware of the nodding, the smiling, things that are telling the room how you feel. And if you're sitting there not paying anything of it, someone may just be like, they look like they're really pissed off. And that is not maybe how you are feeling. So it's really important to be, conscious of all of those things as you walk into those rooms or interact with those people.
Yes. Know that, this is a multi-way street. If you just want to demonstrate your expertise on paper, there probably are some practice areas for you where you can sit, alone in a room and not have to worry about how you're perceived. But for most people, this is something they need buy-in from partners, they need buy-in from clients, and they cannot demonstrate their expertise without that buy-in. So it's something that everyone needs to be considering. Okay. And just the last two of these, Cialdini's principles of persuasion, reciprocity. People generally want to kind of pay back debts and treat others the way that they've been treated. So make sure you're giving before you're expecting to get. So when you're working with partners, coming to them with kind of a mindset of how can I be of service and of value, and thinking about that is more likely going to put you in a position where you're going to get. And the other side, the last one here is commitment and consistency. People feel obligated to follow through once they've shown some level of commitment. So if I reach out to Ben and say, hey, I'd love, I'm working on my career goals. I'd love to share them with you and hear your insights and learn a little bit about you. And he and I, have a great coffee and he gives me all sorts of advice. And then I start, doing what he suggests at the firm. He's going to feel, bought into my success and more likely to advocate for me. Want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, sometimes that happens formally, like some firms in reviews ask you, where do you want to go and how can we help you? And I can tell you, I've come in with a written plan to partner, maybe one who works with me and one who's like on the executive sort of level. And when you come back and they're like, how are you doing on those things? And they feel bought into your success. So when they see you thriving, they feel like they've imparted something upon you. And now everyone's so happy for each other. I'm happy that I asked them and brought them into it and got their advice. They're happy that they're seeing me do it. And it feels like we're really like pouring into one another. And that's a positive thing you're trying to build. And so that can be a formal thing at a firm or an informal thing with a friend. But either way, there is something that comes out of that from a relationship standpoint.
So let's talk a little bit about building relationships outside of your organization. I think this is important to consider as soon as you can. I don't think that there's a time in your career where you're like, okay, now I'll start to focus on my network. This should be happening in law school and continuously. Kind of the level and bandwidth that you have to spend time building relationships, brand new relationships, will kind of vary depending on where you are in your career. But this is an important thing to consider, no matter how large your firm is. Knowing other people in the community is going to be key, and all those reasons why it's important to have relationships in the first place. So there's lots of different ways to build a network. Again, I think it's really key to start with, what do you like? So who are you trying, what are you trying to make happen? If you have kind of clear goals for your practice, that makes it a little bit easier. When you're earlier in your career, it may be harder to figure out what your clear goals are. And in that case, your goal should be building connections with like-minded professionals. And so, there's affinity bars and things like that are less about like, how do I get a client out of this in the next 12 months? And more about, how do I build a network of people around me who are like-minded and are going places and will help me throughout my career. So I have different ones listed here, conferences and seminars. There's professional associations related to personal interest, would be those like affinity bars, or even just like wine clubs and dog clubs and all the fun things that you can do specific to your hobbies. I love it when hobbies overlap with professional interests, and a lot of times there's some of those things happening. So some like bar associations may have sports events to raise money, or kind of nonprofit components to it. So I'm always looking to check as many boxes as I can when I'm spending my time, away from my family, and thinking about like, oh, what's going to help me professionally and be actually enjoyable. I think people are having success putting together these groups on their own, if they can't exactly find kind of the perfect fit for them. I've had people who have kind of put together surf groups where they invite, we're in California on the coast, people, an attorney, maybe a corporate attorney, is especially interested in surfing and invites other corporate attorneys and in-house counsel to surf, every Thursday in Huntington Beach. So, what are they? Feeding two birds with one stone. Thinking of ways to do something that you find personally fulfilling and have some additional insight, or reasons to do it. Participating in online communities is kind of a newer thing of whether that's on LinkedIn, or I know people were having some success with Twitter back in the day, of kind of getting connected with like-minded professionals, alumni events. So really kind of spending time researching to find things that are going to align, and then also recognizing not everything is going to be a win. So go and test it out, grab somebody that to feel it out with you, and see if it's the right fit for you.
Yeah, and maybe I could do this faster, but sometimes there are ones where I'm like, I'm going to do this for a year. And I'm going to attend every single one of those alumni events or whatever it is. And after a year, I revalue it, because after one, you won't know. After 2, 3, who knows? And so I've kind of I have to look at the task and then like measure it out so I can actually see when I think it's like, I don't know if that's going in that direction. Maybe right away. But most of the time I find you probably don't know right away. And I will also say, just for the affinity bar things, if you're early career and you're like, I'm in this group and I don't know if I really like it, you can join new lawyer groups and things like that. And that may be your connection to pivoting out of that practice and into a new one. So when you say, hey, I've been doing, construction defect or insurance defense, and I'm thinking I'd rather go into private client trust and estate things, guess what? The trust and estate lawyers that are in your new lawyer kind of cohort groups may be the way that you end up over in that practice area. So you can find connections, even if you're not convinced you want to do the one thing in your practice area today. So you may find other crossover connections, and that'll grow with you too. So
great. So the last thing that we want to kind of hit on briefly is being thoughtful as you're building these relationships about what kind of reputation, how you want to be known in the marketplace and with the people that you're working with. I mean, I'm sure Ben will reiterate this, that like doing actual work, excellent work is going to be the best way internally for you to maintain a reputation that is going to lead to success and more opportunities. I think it's important to recognize that a lot of people are assuming the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So when you join these organizations and commit to things and then flake, this is not helping. So make sure you're committing to things that you can actually do and that you can bring the best version of yourself to everything that you're raising your hand for. And I think a key thing to talk about as we're wrapping this up and kind of looking at all the psychology and science around this, authenticity is going to be evident in everything that you do. So really figuring out what it is you like and want, and then making a point of bringing your true self and being a little bit vulnerable is going to open doors for you. Demonstrating enthusiasm, that's one thing that I find that attorneys are worried that they're going to be perceived as too needy or raising their hand too much. That is not what I'm hearing from senior practitioners. They wish people made it clear that they were excited and interested. So going above and beyond to demonstrate your enthusiasm, if you're interested in something, is going to be very well received. And then obviously producing excellent work product, it needs to be prioritized. So whatever you need to do to ensure that you have the skills to deliver excellent work product, I think that kind of fits into a lot of what we've discussed here.
I'll just say just a slightly different way from my years of playing sports. They would say something like control the controllables. So if you get an assignment, you control the work product you give back to the partner. If you say you're going to be somewhere at a certain time or you're going to do something, maybe a non-billable task someone has asked you to do it well, do it timely. Those are all things that you can control. And if you get feedback that you thought, oh, wow, I thought that was great, and you get feedback, take it to heart and work on it. And so those are the things that are within your control. You can't always control that somebody's having a bad day. You can't control that they've got a million things going on, but you can control your attitude about how you approach it, that enthusiasm, the eagerness to dive into something. Those are all things that you can control. And if you seem like you're not really interested, not really in tune, people are not going to be attracted to that, and it'll immediately put them off. So if you keep that in mind, that this is my mindset, this is my attitude going into this thing, and you can control that, a lot of things will come from that.
Great. And last thing that we want to talk about is kind of leveraging the internet in your visibility, especially if we're at a larger firm, thinking about, what does your bio say about you? Are your rep matters on there? Is what you find online telling the same story that you're telling and what you're trying to do? There's lots of ways to do this beyond your bio, but also your LinkedIn. Anywhere you have a profile on the internet, make sure that you're mindful about what it is saying. Think about thought leadership. So, are you writing and speaking about topics that you want to be known as an authority for? These are all things that people are going to see generally before they talk to you. Even your partners are probably Googling you or at least looking you up to see if you might be a fit for a matter. So this is something that I think is really only going to become more impactful and influential. All right. So we talked about thinking about, building behaviors through habits, building quality relationships that are going to help you attract and attract the work that you want and build the skills that you need to get the work or to build the practice that you're really interested in, that is going to give you career fulfillment and engagement. And then we talked a little bit about visibility within the marketplace. There's lots of resources available to you. You can reach out to me. I have an associate resource guide. Things like Justia, things like your local bar associations, your state bar associations. Being intentional about figuring out what's available to you and finding things that align with your interests are really going to help you figure out how to spend your precious time, because we all have, incredible billing requirements. So, doing things for the sake of doing things is generally not going to result in success. Ben, do you want to add anything?
No, and if you do come across somebody in your practice that you're like, I really like them, I think we have similar interests, they're really thriving in this area, look what they've done and use it as a roadmap for yourself. Not that you need to copy what they've done, but as inspiration for how maybe you want to do it, organizations that you may want to be a part of, things like that. Find yourself a roadmap. It's kind of like I said earlier, I've got taken little things from a bunch of different partners and tried to make it my thing. So if you find something that you think is really interesting, or a person who really loves similar things to you, use it as a tool for yourself to kind of build out the way that you want to approach some of these things going forward.
Great. So we're ready to do the Q&A. I see we have one in the chat. Ben, well, I can read it and Ben can answer it. So
Let's see.
what habits can associates adopt to maintain a healthy work-life balance and prioritize their well-being? Remote work blurred the lines between personal and professional life.
Yeah. So this was a real struggle. I can tell you, my wife still works from home 100% of the time, and so we live it day to day. I'm a little more in office, but I think I used the term calendar blocking earlier, and sometimes you're in a position in your career where you can do that, other times you're not. So I am sensitive to that. But if you can work on calendar blocking and setting calendar invites and reminders and things like that, it really helps you block those things off. Because I had a mentor tell me, show me your calendar, I'll show you what's important to you. And so if it's working out that's important to you, if it's certain family obligations, those things are important to you. You're trying to strike the right balance between the work obligations that you have and these other things that are really core to who you are. And if you put it on the calendar and you commit to doing it and you show up, that'll help you find a healthier balance. Otherwise, there will always be more work. Things will always pile on top of you, and it's easy to shove those things aside because you're busy. And it may happen in a moment or in a couple of moments, but you have an opportunity to reset. And I think that helps you stay structured and kind of get back on when you might have fallen off.
Great. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I think we have a few more. Thank you both for that presentation, and thank you, Ben, for that additional insight. I think our next question is, what do you think the number one common mistake or bad habit that associates should avoid?
Ben, do you have a visceral reaction?
I mean, yeah, there's a couple of things that come to mind. I'll say that keep your head down and just like stay focused on your work is one that I hear a lot. And I'm going to say that maybe came from another generation of lawyers who just was like, keep in your office and grind it out. And I get it. We have billable requirements, but there is a perception that if you're out and about in the community, you're trying to do business development. I just say you're network building, your relationship building. So just keep in mind that you need to be intentional and have like a big picture of what's going on. Have a big picture about the case you're working on with the partner, have a big picture about your career, and pivot. And sometimes I think when you're so narrowly focused, you lose sight of that big picture. And all of a sudden you find yourself a decade or more into a career, finding you're unhappy and you're burned out. And if you revisit those things more commonly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, I don't know, whatever it is that works for you, you'll be in better tune and you'll be ready to shift when a life changes. You have a different phase. And I think too often we're so narrowly focused because we're really driven at completing certain tasks and we can be really good at it. And we just all of a sudden 8 years is gone and you realize this is not what I wanted. And I always think that's unfortunate. And it also comes out in the work product.
Not to double down on that, and we spent a lot of time talking about this, but similarly to Ben's kind of keeping your head down and just doing the work. Like I've noticed a lot of people talking about efficiency and associates talking about like, oh, if I go into the office, it's burning up an hour and a half. But the reality is there's so much to gain when you're being intentional about it. I'm not saying just being in the office like there's magic there. There may be some opportunities that you wouldn't get if you were not going into the office, but that visibility piece is so key that only thinking about efficiency and getting your work done is really going to shoot you in the foot in the long run. And so prioritizing the long term of your career and what you should be doing today to make those things a reality.
See another question in the chat. We can both tag team this one. What should I do if I find specific animosity towards me or another associate?
Have you experienced this, Ben?
Yeah, I haven't had any drastic examples, but I will say where there have been more difficult personalities. Maybe that's the way I can put it. I don't know if I would say I've had animosity, but there have been more difficult personalities for me that I've worked with. And I think for me, trying to understand, again, going back to the big picture, what is going on with this person and like, how do I try to relate to them? What are they really after? Like I'm charitable. Maybe they're having a bad day. They're probably not having like a bad 3 years that you worked with them, but you have to find ways to work with them. And so for sometimes it's like, don't take that personal. And I get it. I take a lot of things personal, but like you have to find certain ways to work with certain people. You may not have a choice in that specific season. And going back to something that was said earlier, I hope that's not a season that you're in forever. I hope you find ones that line up with your own. But if you're in that season for whatever reason, you got to find the best way to work through it. And I think being especially charitable with people and finding ways to relate to them and kind of humanizing the situation rather than somebody who's just trying to get billable hours and work product and they're mean to you. If you realize that they're a person and hopefully they will realize you're a person, you can soften some of those rough edges. And I know that's difficult. So I'm saying that from on top of my soapbox. But if you do those things and you start from a really charitable perspective, I think it may be a little bit easier than if you just have it in your mind who they are, how difficult they are. That's more difficult to overcome.
Yeah, and I love that approach. And also, kind of what we're talking about of getting other connections in the firm so that you can understand that person better. And also just having more relationships will make it easier to kind of weather these types of people and help you kind of recognize, like he's saying, it's a season and you have a lot of options as to where to spend your energy. So without knowing enough about the situation, I think, Ben's approach of like really understanding that it's probably not so much about you and, understanding how they're perceiving the situation, and then also making sure that you're building up a support system of people that give you different perspectives and understanding of what the situation might be.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for all of your insight and that great presentation. And thank you all for your questions. We're almost out of time for today, so I'm going to go ahead and hand things back over to Marina to wrap things up.
Thanks, Nina, and thanks, Ben. Thanks, Lana. And thanks to all of you for being here today. You guys are really what make the webinars worth it. And so we're glad to help you, get new skills and grow your practices. We were talking a lot today about ways associates can position themselves for success. One of those things that Lana and Ben touched on is taking advantage of online visibility. And so we wanted to make sure that you knew that Justia Marketing Solutions can also help you with that. So our suite of digital marketing solutions is designed to help lawyers grow their practice and achieve their goals. We have Justia premium placements available in the Justia Lawyer Directory for more visibility there, in addition to Justia Elevate websites and Justia Amplify PPC management services. And then, of course, the Justia Connect Pro membership is also out there to help you guys get even more visibility. If you're somebody who's using that free membership now, there are some opportunities for expanded visibility with Justia Connect Pro and some other benefits you can take advantage of, like featured reviews for your Justia Lawyer Directory profile. So we encourage you to check all of that out. The information is available on our marketing website at marketing.justia.com. And of course, if you just have questions, our team is happy to chat about it with you. There's a contact us button there. There's a phone number there. No commitments, no payment required. We'd be happy to talk with you about how those solutions can help you and your practice grow. Thank you again for being here today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.